The generator hummed in the hedge, a low animal with an even heart. The dawn over Lecky held salt and static, a wet film of morning before heat forced its will. A security bulb blinked, steadied, and poured its thin cone on the iron scrollwork. The fountain whispered in the roundabout like someone telling a secret to stone. A man in a faded blue uniform tested the gate's hinge with a mechanic's tenderness. One sure hand, head tilted to catch what metal wanted. The badge on his chest read, OKON. The letters paler than the cloth they clung to. Ash flattened the gray at his temples. The jumpsuit sagged at the pockets. When he straightened, he favored his right leg habit, not injury, and let the compound's geometry print itself on his eyes. He wasn't any gate man. Before light, behind linen curtains upstairs. He'd watched this same gate pitch its shadow over the cobbles. His reflection, ghosted in the glass, looked older than his reputation ever allowed. The robe, the cut, the posture, none of it mattered in that hour. Chief Chukwuma Emeka rested his palm on the balcony rail. The way you greet a rival you expect to respect. He hadn't slept. Not last night. Not the night the thought hardened. Remove the crown. Put on sandals. The words came without trumpet, while the ceiling fan carved its slow doctrine. Private eyes write reports for men who want to be surprised politely. Hunters go to the bush. He dressed for the bush. Under a bare bulb the color of weak tea. He pulled the uniform from its plastic and shook the starch smell loose. Ash into the hairline. Powder into the lines. Time had already begun. He rehearsed a softer register. Chipped off the natural authority in his voice until it sounded like his father's. The gold watch slid into an envelope with a note no one would read. Temptation is lazy, don't feed it. He laced the cheap shoes and pulled the knot hard like ending a sentence. On the console in the hall, a phone slept beside a photo of his son. Dubai would wake the glass soon. A high floor and a higher merger, waiting for the boy he'd raised for steel. Emeka Holdings about to marry a shipping empire with long arms. It should have been the only storm in his head. Instead, cheekbones and an Instagram nod. Tina Okoye. He'd met her 3 times. Each time, he watched her eyes when James entered a room. They didn't soften. They sharpened. Hungry like a hand on a trophy. He'd tried to say it gently. Then not, but a young heart loves arguing more than listening. James, generous to a fault, defended her with the eloquence you reserve for the beautiful and doomed. Love argues, truth waits. The service door opened onto the side path while coffee began its small sermon somewhere inside. He walked the grass edge in the mango shade, a man who remembered how to move unseen. The guardhouse stool took his weight. The generator's thrum climbed through the concrete into his bones. He matched his breath to it until the rhythm lived in him. The city woke in pieces. A jogger's breath huffed white. A kiki whispered up the lane. Plastic flapping. A woman carried her umbrella like a black satellite. A black SUV idled for breakfast. From the intercom, the cook leaned and blinked curiosity into manners. New hand. Yes. Ma, he said, gravel added to velvet. I go, they open. She buzzed him in like she'd expected him. At 8:40, the front doors signed her into mourning. Tina glided into the light, minted and lacquered. Mint, silk, braids, sunglasses dangled in 2 fingers like evidence. Her perfume drew a floral shadow in front of her. She addressed the cook without the trouble of turning. New gate man. Tell him when I move. He moves. I don't like a slowed morning. Yes, madam, the cook said. He opened when she reached the line. He bowed the head she didn't look at and slid the iron aside. He watched her, not watching him, and filed it with the special indifference reserved for names on payroll and not on Christmas lists. She drove out one-handed, phone to ear, tail lights winking like a dare to the sun. He swept. He checked the weld with the hairline. He learned camera pings and what a stubborn boy would climb. In the mango shade, he opened a small notepad and wrote in tidy script, Day 1. Observe, alter nothing, inventory, angles, routines, pressure. He didn't write hunger from skipping breakfast, or anger at a laugh that never reached eyes, or fears old animals scratching his ribs about being too late to save a son from an expensive lesson. Grace carried linen with eyes trained down by habit. The gardener tuned an old high life and loved the hibiscus enough to cut it carefully. A driver practiced being furniture. This house was a country with its own foreign policy. Hush or be hushed. By noon, the sun threw hard-edged geometry across the marble. The hedge gave off green heat. The bulb buzzed like it was trying to be a bee. The uniform clung with tired loyalty. Patience was the test, not disguise. She returned at 1, didn't tap the brake. He met the moving line and opened anyway. She crossed the stone like a stage she had outgrown. You, she said into the heat, never risking a name. Next time the gate opens before I can see myself in it. Understand? Yes, madam. No food for you today. Maybe hunger can teach your legs what a clock is. Yes, madam. The chief in him went quiet under the tarp. Leadership by humiliation is a theology for the poor in spirit. He wrote it down as if he were the clerk of a hard court. Hunger as instruction. Shursan. Linjol. He let the generator steady him again. Shadow pulled evening across the drive. The gardener's radio changed key. He traced sight lines in his head, thresholds and hallways. The places a house confesses. He thought signage and consent, and the difference between vengeance and policy. Rage didn't do logistics. Logistics required the day's cooler half. By 10, the fountain whispered like a pen on a secret letter. He checked the road, the way a fisherman feels the net. At 11:45, a black Lexus slid to the curb with its lights lowered like a request. The door opened. A man unfolded tall, tattoos written into a private constitution. Gym shoulders. Cologne, like spiced fuel. Trouble, but branded. The doors opened again. Silk and skin, bare feet on stone, laughter sharp enough to scratch marble. She ran to him and kissed carelessly in the bulb's cone. Faith in walls, making arrogance cheap. He watched a second, then the second after. The way you watch a car that won't stop in time. He looked away because not looking is also discipline. The car clicked shut. The house swallowed them. The night resumed its breathing. He reached for the notebook. Stop. Don't write with heat in your hand. He opened the cheap phone, hit record, and spoke into the hum. James, he said, using the hush like a confidant. Not everything that glitters is gold. I'm watching with both eyes in a place you left your heart. I won't break it to bring you truth. I'll build a mirror. I'll hold it at the right hour. He saved the note behind a code and set the phone face down. Palms on knees. Breath like the generator until the world lay flat. The bulb stuttered once and held. A gecko chased a moth in ridiculous ballet above the window. Far down the lane, a dog argued with a ghost only dogs can see. The gate did what gates do. Held. Patient. Humming. Ready to open either way on command. He promised sleep to himself. He didn't keep it. He sat in the blue until the sky paled like a stain being washed from linen. He wrote in the cleanest hand he had. Day 1 complete. He underlined hard enough to score the paper. A groove for day 2 to find and follow. By mid-morning, heat laid itself on the tiles like a verdict. Inside, the air conditioning drew a thin, cool line through the living room, while staff moved their quiet orbits. Orders traveled faster than light here, Madam said, and each syllable stamped a passport you couldn't refuse. Too much salt, Tina said, tasting stew with a gold spoon and wrinkling her whole face. Do you cook with your eyes closed? Again. Yes, madam, the cook murmured, reaching for stock, apologizing to spices that had done nothing wrong. He kept his eyes on his hands. The mirror above the sideboard held her instead, a figure signing herself into the day. At the gate, the old man fed a cloth into a bucket, wrung it until his knuckles blanched. He polished iron like polishing a gravestone, patient, thorough. When the rag quieted, he stood easy with his head tipped, listening to the road. The notepad sat on the guardhouse sill, a clean rectangle waiting to become testimony. He didn't write yet, not while the world spoke. At 10:30, a delivery van played Lagos Chicken with the curb. The driver yelled, eggs, prams, madam order, like the house might argue. The cook called gate, with half apology, half command. He swung the iron open, checked and signed with a hand older than it needed to be. He knew how to write less well than he could. The part demanded it. Good performances launder truth. By noon, her steps had a metronome's cruelty. He heard her cross to the drive. Before her perfume arrived, a floral metal breath of a phone that never slept. You, she said, stopping in the throat of the gate, sunglasses cutting the glare. Why is the car not at the steps when I come down? I go call driver, he said, head lowered. She let silence sit on his neck like a hand. Do I pay you to think or to move? Answer, move, madam, then move. And tell the cook, if he overboils an egg again, I'll make him swallow shell to learn the difference. She went. He closed the iron and set the rag down. He reached for the book. Day 2. Instruction by humiliation. Sarar. Ling Ti. Egg equals proxy war. Driver delay equals leverage. He drew a square where the hedge bulged into a blind spot. Trim hedge. Camera signage first. He underlined signage twice. Not for court, but for conscience. Procedure is a kind of prayer. Afternoon crept slow and bright. In the kitchen, the cook plated lunch like he was building a bomb and wanted the wires right. Grace folded napkins into sharp sails. The Mercedes reversed into its chalked H and exhaled relief. Tina re-entered, trailing cold air and performance. One look at the plate, and she remade the lesson. I said medium. She told the egg that had chosen the wrong life. To the cook, you like to test me? No, madam. On your knees, she said, sweet as battery acid. If you waste food, worship it. Lick. The room held its spine still. The old man appeared at the threshold because doors don't stop men whose job is watching. He saw stew glisten on tile, saw the soft slap where shame meets floor. He'd promised he wouldn't intervene unless fire jumped the hedge. He bent anyway, got a hand under the cook's elbow. It's okay, he said, a pitch that could make a mad dog sit. Wash. Go. Tina turned, eyes shining in the way of glass just before it cuts. Are you next? She held the spoon like a gavel and swung the metaphor wrong on purpose. You look like you need punishment too. He kept his gaze on the space beside her shoulder. The old security trick reads as servility, hides calculation. I will sweep the walk, madam. He did. To the mango tree. Then he set the broom down and wrote, Day 3, threshold crossed, physical humiliation, minimal intervention to protect staff, temptation to break cover strong. Do not. He pressed the pen harder than paper deserved, breathed like smoke had entered the room, and a child waited in the next one. Cowardice and patience wear the same coat. He prayed. He wore the right one. Toward evening, the radio changed from high life to the speed the city keeps at night. Glass mirrored the rooms. Laughter rose upstairs. Wrong for the hour. A bottle clinked the way bottles do right before their evidence. He tipped a kettle over a basin on his hot plate and let the steam ghost his face. Hunger wasn't the test. He'd trained for hunger decades ago. The test was standing still while men you paid disappeared into your son's hallway. Old Testament fire shook its matchbox in his pocket. He didn't strike it. Curfew for the wicked arrived on schedule. At 11:45, a black Lexus pulled in with the moral confidence of money. The same man in the same swagger. 2 minutes later, silk again, bare feet again, laughter again. He watched his jaw, then the man's reflection, then nothing. Restraint as wound and strategy. Morning came with rain shouldering the city. It fell in muscled sheets, pinning leaves, pressing silt into throat-choked drains. The guardhouse leaked one honest line. He slid the stool so the drip wouldn't find his collar. He made a shelter for the notepad with his palm and wrote anyway. Day 4. Rain. Morale. Grace eyes red. He capped the pen and watched water draw small rivers in dust. Tina appeared late. White dress pretending purity. Wine glass where an umbrella should be. She stood dry under the eave. Let him soak. How's the hunger strike? She asked, sipping rainlight. Did the storm feed you? He said nothing. She smiled without teeth. I don't know why James hired you. You smell like poverty. He filed the sentence at full weight. Sometimes a judge doesn't need audio. Your conscience does. He held the iron. Lightning scrawled white scripture. Somewhere a siren decided to matter. He used the weather. Under cover of rain, he walked the perimeter twice and measured cable runs, measured radius for microphone, pressed his palm to stucco where a camera could sit and judge no one and catch the truth. In the bathroom mirror, he saw the man beneath the powder and told him to wait. He called the assistant in a voice the tile tossed back. Balcony, hall, kitchen pass-through, gestor only, he said. No bedrooms, no baths. Legal signage at the gate. Chain of custody from day 1. Already drafted, the assistant said. Paper shuffled. Comfort itself. Hashes. Redactions. Cloud. And offline. Redact staff faces. He said, consent signed where needed. He hung up. The mirrors showed both men. He wiped until the poor one returned. Near dusk she arranged sincerity for a Dubai call. The ring light made a saint out of her mouth. I miss you, she breathed, prayer voice. He watched from the kitchen door and saw what James could not. The reflection after the call drained the smile like a sink. He didn't pity. He didn't hate. He logged. Grace came down the corridor and almost collided at the turn. Linen slit, a small slap. The sound was small, but in small sounds cities live. Do you see wrinkles? Tina said. Are you blind? I'm sorry. Madam, Grace whispered, palm to cheek, as if keeping heat from staining the world. He stepped before permission, lifted the spilled cotton like rescuing a bird, handed the basket back with eyes kept low. Tina's smile hooked. If I hear you speak to James, I'll scream you tried to enter my room, she whispered. I'll cut myself if I have to. Kiri will eat your bones. Yes, madam, he said. He stared at the floorboards because looking at her mouth might pull truth out of him when the plan demanded silence. He wrote the threat exact, including the prison's names served wrong. Names matter when people weaponize what they don't know. Evening laid itself like a flag. The radio found a song older than the house and braver than money. The hum in the iron changed, as if a wire had been stretched between two tired men to trip a folly. He opened the recorder and let the silence say enough. Then the phone went face down. In the dark, the gate held, the sandals held. The crown slept in a drawer like a tired king. He slid the book shut on day 4 and underlined into day 5. Rain muscled the lagoon gray before dawn. and pressed cloud to hedge until wall and sky matched like old paint. The roof confessed a narrow leak that drew an honest line beside the plastic stool. The old man nudged the stool with his boot, surrendered the patch to the drip, and listened to the generator's wetter hum. He ran his palm along hinge and filigree, felt for rain-softened stubbornness. Beads clung, indecisive. He wrung the rag, hung it, checked the road. Oca de his, umbrella a satellite, tire sloshing gutter. The same song as yesterday. The world remade itself with cheap percussion. Inside, the house woke slow. The cook lit the flame in careful prayer. Grace moved with a hand hovering at her cheek, ready for heat that didn't come. The driver wiped a car nobody sane would take out. The gardener clipped under the awning, radio tuned to a nostalgia that made lies sound plausible. He lifted the notepad from the ledge to keep it dry. Day 5. Rain. Visibility. Energy. Leak fixes after storm. He drew a square where hedge met wall heavier than yesterday. Blind spot when hedge fat. Trim. Logistics sang him down out of anger. Near noon she appeared. White dress. A wine glass. Where courtesy should be. She tasted the weather like it was poured for her. How's the hunger strike? Mr. Gate, she said, pausing under safety. Has the storm fed you? He held the iron and let rain give him a face. I don't know why James hired you. She went on. You smell like poverty. She left before the insult finished landing. His fingers tightened around iron, not because of age, but because he'd taught younger men not to answer this sentence with a fist. He watched her disappear into glass and rehearsed a sentence he wouldn't say out loud. Wealth without tenderness is a season, not a pedigree. He wrote the line she said verbatim, so he wouldn't improve it with memory. He slid the book under, let rain do the counting. When the storm softened to a steady weep, he walked the perimeter in his poor man's shuffle. He mapped the balcony angle, the hall corners, the pass-through into the kitchen, the threshold to the guest room that deserved to know who crossed it. Steps for cable, the pole by the hedge for weight, the stucco that would take a lens without a fence. A sound snapped the corridor flat. Small, cheap. He turned in time to see Grace's hand on her cheek again, a pillowcase sliding, and that bright satisfaction on Tina's face, reserved for people who exchange power for dignity and think it a bargain. Do you see wrinkles? Are you blind? She said. I'm sorry, madam, Grace whispered, and the apology fell to the tile because it had nowhere to land. He pretended rules and stepped anyway. He crouched, lifted cotton like it could bruise, set the stack back in Grace's arms, kept his gaze near the floor. Tina whispered her threat with relish, the prison named like a trinket. Kirikiri will eat your bones. Yes, madam, he said. Grace took the basket and gripped this small rescue the way you grip a rung when the ladder comes late. Thank you, she breathed, a treason that sounded like relief. In the bathroom, he phoned the assistant again. Signage before lenses. He said, Time stamps on export, audio only where signs say. When I say cut, cut. Yes. Seer, the assistant said, procedure pleased with itself. Fluorescence showed him the seams of the disguise. He wiped, and the poor man returned. If this was theater, every prop would be earned, every exit deserved. Rain thin. The fountain found its voice. The house grew louder, as if absolved by weather. A speaker tried a playlist. Laughter reheated upstairs. The bottle sang again. From the kitchen door he saw Tina angle the phone on a tripod, ring light haloing a slice of luxury watch. Art. Mercedes key then cooed into Dubai. I pray for you every day. When the call ended, she stared at the black glass too long and the smile drained like a sink. He filed it where tells are kept. He did not write that. Some notes live in bone, After dark, the storm returned with less muscle. He ate 2 crackers out of his pocket, and they felt like feast. He thumbed the recorder and whispered into the hum, saving the same quiet warning for the boy. An ocean away. He didn't send it. Timing is its own faith. 11:45 brought a car like ritual. New plates. Same grammar. A man, then a woman with hair like a question mark. Music. Then the sound people make when walls are asked to hold their secrets. He wrote nothing. He marked time. Morning came with a bruise that wanted to heal. The hedge drooped into the imagined camera line. He called the gardener, took the clippers badly on purpose, so the man could fix it and own it. Dignity grows where ownership lives. By noon, the internet opened its mouth. She posted by the Mercedes wearing a watch that wasn't hers. Rich wife, boss lady. Secured. He screenshotted nothing. Time, not pictures. Public narrative. Sherrard. Chassit. He drew a line to press, another to council. He'd built companies with fewer lines. Under the mango tree in uniform, and with his real back straight, he called his son. Come home tomorrow, he said. The sentence, a lever, moving a larger thing. Let's end this. James exhaled over Wi-Fi like a man who had seen a shape and chosen not to flinch. Yes. Dad, no defense, no drama. Calm. He wrote across the page with a hand that wouldn't shake. Mirror. Ready. Dusk put its hand on the house. The fountain braided old rain with new quiet. Grace laughed once at something in the kitchen without checking the door. The generator cleared its throat for a speech it would finally get to give. The gate stood where it always had. The patient hinge between what you keep and what you let in. Tomorrow would weigh what it had held. Accounts would be called due. Morning cracked with brittle confidence. Heat took the tiles first. Sun clanged off the fountain and scattered light over the portico. The day smelled like tire rubber and hibiscus. The driver murmured at a soft front wheel. Hood lifted. A mechanic's prayer. She came down in a robe and a complaint. Where is that useless gate man? Mascara perfect. Hair high. The Benz has a flat. Does nobody understand urgency? Madam, the new driver said. Rehearsed apology raised like a shield. The other man, he resigned this morning. Someone picked him up early. Good riddance, she said. Pleased with her own weather, she spun for her phone and stopped cold. James stood in the room with a carry-on by his shoe and the gravity of a decision already made. Light cut him in clean planes. His watch breathed quiet. You didn't tell me you were coming, she said, surprise still warm, performance cooling over it. She crossed and opened her arms. He didn't move. She rapped air and refusal, stepped back and dressed recoil as pout. We need to talk, he said. What is it? Concern poured on like perfume. You're scaring me. He sat calm as a blade laid on a table and pressed the remote. The TV woke. A neutral rectangle waited to become a witness. A hallway bled onto the screen, grainy honesty doing its job. 2 bodies crossed into frame and forgot the world. A kiss borrowed from another man's life. The room shrank around it. I can explain, she said. Her mouth tried to laugh. Then tragedy. Then sincerity. That old fool, the gate man, he wanted me. Made me uncomfortable. He tried. That old fool, James said. Eyes on the screen. Is my father. Silence put boots on and walked into the room. The front door opened, and Chief Emeka entered in blue agata that moved like calm water. He wasn't in uniform. He carried no anger, only stillness enough to make the air expensive. Her knees found marble. Sir Chief Daddy, please, the words tripped, each dressed for a different audience. Wine Carlo's friends. He lifted one hand. Flies dropped. You thought you were performing for a poor man, he said. voice soft enough to qualify as a kindness. You were auditioning for a king. Tears sweeted up. I love James, she said, putting the name down like a chip. He was away, lonely I was. Stop, James said, looking at her. No heat. Heat would have been a gift. This isn't a negotiation. He clicked. Another clip. James is a fool. I'm here for the money. A whisper about screaming and lies and prisons as leashes. The spoon raised in the kitchen like a gavel swung by a child. The house gasped from somewhere deep in its pipes. You can edit anything, she said, reaching for the new Bible. Context setup. He set the remote aside like laying down a weapon that had already finished its work. He nodded to the guard in the doorway. The man straightened. Please escort Ms. Okoye out. James said, with nothing that belongs here. She clawed for fury. You can't do this to me. I'll ruin you. I'll go online. You already did, he said. Then you met truth. She grabbed his forearm the way she'd grabbed the world. He removed her hand like a ring he'd worn too long. The guard took her elbow, gentle as a nurse, and guided her through the doorway she'd treated like a stage. She fought the way people fight when the audience leaves. On the steps, light made everything honest. The driver looked away. The cook and Grace stood in the hall, not smiling, not crowing, only present like witnesses when fear recedes. The gate waited, iron and patient. Chief, she sobbed one last chant. Forgive me. I was lost. I can be different. Please. You are not lost, he said. You are found. That is the problem. Her suitcase thumped the drive. The door swung. The iron closed with a sound that remembered every night it had held its tongue. Inside, the house exhaled. The fountain sounded less like a metronome and more like rain returned to the right place. The AC sighed and forgot to perform. James stood where she'd knelt and watched a dust mote cross. A sun square, seeing his angle. Are you all right? His father asked. Not to be answered, but because the question is part of the work. She lied to me, James said. The tremor lived elsewhere. About everything. Yes, Chief said. You loved anyway. That is not a crime. It is, he said, softer. If it makes me cruel to the right people, that I can't forgive. He turned to the hall and found Grace at the edge, hands clasped like she'd been born that way. I'm sorry, he told her. Simple as water. No one will live in fear here again. She nodded and let tears do their washing. Thank you, Seer. The cook stood with a towel he wasn't ashamed of. The driver breathed like a man finishing a fight. The gardener outside cut the hedge to music inside his own head. In the study, the assistant set a folder down like a communion. James opened it. Transcripts with scaffolding. Stills under timestamps, chain of custody stamped in monospace that would make a judge smile in their eyes. A voice note's single sentence typed like a benediction. He closed it. Proof's job was done. He didn't need to keep letting it walk across his chest. Why not tell me sooner? He asked, seeing past his father to the version of himself that needed the lesson delivered this way. Because you'd defend her against me, the chief said, pride and apology sharing a chair. I will not fight my son for his chains. They stood on the balcony while afternoon softened its fist. Traffic stacked its noise neatly on the curb for night's collection. A white egret drew a line under the paragraph that had gone on too long. Love without truth is slavery. James said, tasting it. It fit like a healed scar aches before rain. Downstairs the staff moved like you do after hurricanes, counting each other. Grace and the cook traded a look that translated to, we're still here. The driver coiled a hose with reverence. The gardener stepped back from the hedge and nodded once. Having finished the math, evening grew like mercy. The chief poured palm wine and didn't toast. They drank. What now? James asked. Now we stop being a house that lies to itself. the chief said. Policies for small places kitchen. Gate-like boardrooms. Let the crown rest. Wear sandals until our feet remember why we bought shoe. James laughed like a stone rolled off his chest. You trimmed the hibiscus badly. I expected forgiveness from plants. The chief said, they are less merciful than people. Later, a lawyer called to say a letter would come dressed as a suit. We'll answer on paper. James said, no spectacle. He meant it. He'd learned the difference between silence and concealment. On the sidewalk, Tina sat on her suitcase with a phone bright as a stage. She typed a caption that tried to invent a new morning. The algorithm purred. Sympathy is indiscriminate. Strangers loved her for 12 minutes. Weather changed. Inside, the house settled. He opened his laptop, typed a list with no title, hotline, signage, training, apologized to Grace. He shut it and did the last item first. When violet laid itself on the palms, father and son stood at the threshold. The iron had cooled. They put their hands on it anyway. Regrets? James asked. Several, the chief said. Not the sandals. The gate hummed like it agreed. The street let go of the day. They didn't reach for the drawer. They let air move around them the way a house breathes after shame is measured and paid. The geometry finally made sense. They chose the North Hall for honest light, not the ballroom too eager to turn pain into chandeliers. The lawyers wanted windows, a neutral backdrop, outlets that wouldn't betray them if the generator hiccuped. By mid-morning, the air smelled like cable and tape. The assistant leveled a projector with a folded coaster, tested a file. A timestamp bloomed in the corner like a small, implacable star. Another assistant taped cords down so no one could invent injury later. Water lined a table, labels peeled. Logos gone. The legal team spoke in tidy consonants. Procedure made the room safe. Signage. The chief asked. Already up, counsel said, passing a sample cardstock. For safety and security, surveillance in common areas. Consent by entry. Font modest. Language laundered through 3 jurisdictions and a conscience. They doubled the redundancies like folding parachutes. Projector and backup. Portable flat and its shadow. Speakers A and B. HDMI, an unloved VGA. The UPS hummed like a polite bodyguard under the cart. On the long table, binders lined up with labels, source date hash. The hashes printed in monospace, cruel to eyes, comforting to judges. The air-gapped laptop wore tamper tape like a chastity belt. The chief walked the room with a fingertip on chairbacks, reading Braille only he understood. He paused at the window and watched the driveway. The gate framed a patch of sky like a postcard nobody had mailed. A few reporters arrived early. Ring lights, blinking like impatient eyes. You look like a man who refuses to gloat, counsel said. I'm trying not to turn a lesson into a show, he said. Judgment makes fools quick. Let the evidence talk. Counsel said. That was chain of custody's whole sermon. Stop swaggering. Stand facts up without music. By 11, the hall was a mosaic of curiosity. Mid-tier journalists who still used paper. Bloggers smelling blood. 2 cable cameras trained by chaos. Elders who had lent the family their names when names could be collateral. Murmurs collected in corners like dust. The assistants dimmed the room to twilight. James entered in a black suit that didn't flirt. He folded his hands. His wedding band no longer promised to anyone but time. The chief came in water blue and did not sit right away. He met the room like a court, no bravado, no apology. Good morning, James said. We'll be brief. Counsel, we're here to correct the record. We'll show limited footage. Obtained lawfully in common areas, staff faces are redacted unless consented. Please refrain from publishing non-party details. A blogger rolled her eyes at lawfully like it was bottled water. A cameraman yawned. The assistant lowered the lights a shade more. The projector flooded the wall. Clip 1. Night. Hallway. Rug edge. Light surrendering to dark. Two figures collided the way. Only people convinced. No one sees collide. A kiss. Under the timestamp that wasn't theirs to keep, the room made a sound like a lid finding a pot. Clip 2. Balcony. Day. A phone at an ear. A voice. He's a fool. I'm here for the money. Audio clean. Signage inset to make prosecutors nod in their seats. Clip 3. Corridor. A basket. A small slap. A whisper used like poison. If you talk, I scream. Prison as leash. Journalists shifted. The chief's jaw worked once and relaxed. Clip 4. Kitchen. Spoon. Tile turned altar for shame. The cook's face blurred. The time unblurred. Black. Silence crossed its legs in the front row. Counsel. No questions on private matters beyond this. No additional footage released. We're not here to humiliate. We're here because a lie was introduced publicly. And the antidote to a lie is not a better lie. A hand from the third row. Chief, did you disguise yourself as a gate man for 3 weeks? No, he said, not smiling. Sometimes, to test loyalty, you remove your crown and wear sandals. Another hand, a blogger. Entrapment. You manufactured a failure. You can't entrap someone into kindness, counsel said. Or cruelty. Cameras don't make you slap anyone. They make it visible. James leaned an inch closer. I loved blindly. He said, love without truth is slavery. I intend to be free. No applause. Up-in scratched. A ring light blinked agreement. A journalist flipped to a clean page. An elder stood in the back. Mercy is easy when the record is clean, he said. Harder when receipts sit on the table. They ended without flourish. Lights up. Ring lights folded. Cables into cases like tents after storms. The jacaranda in the drive shook purple into heat. In a side room, the junior handed links with watermarks to 2 serious reporters. 24 hours. No ref files. James hung his jacket on a chair that remembered hands before his. The chief loosened nothing. He looked like a man whose prediction forced no joy. A small, deep tiredness where victory should go. You spoke well, counsel said. I spoke plain, James said. Knew. A vlogger jumped them. Vindicated, she sang. Vindication is for argument, the chief said. We had a problem. Any message for the woman? She pivoted to James. He paused, for courtesy. Yes, he said. The vlogger's eyes lit. I hope she learns how to be kind to people who cannot help her. Not the clip she needed. She turned the camera on herself. Outside. The day went bright and brittle. The gate stood straight as if it had seen worse and better. Bloggers posted with headlines that tried to be sorry and salacious. Cable promised panels at 6 featuring an ethicist, a gossip, and a bodyguard who knew everything about nothing. The hall exhaled. The assistants labeled the last binders and slid them into a pelican case with a click that sounded like relief. The projector cooled with a small sigh. In the study, the chief rested his palm on the notepad's cover and felt the groove. Day 1 left like rails. He closed the glass. What now? James asked. Now we sweep, the chief said. Brooms and policies. Everywhere. Our name buys silence. We pay for speech. If there's blowback, there is always blowback, he said. Stand where your feet find ground. Clips ricocheted. A tired hashtag lay down. A worse pun rose. Family chats chimed. Cousins asked, Are you okay? Aunties said God says. Uncles forwarded crooked screenshots with SMH like a prayer. They answered what required answering and let the rest drift. From the kitchen, Plates made unafraid sounds. In the hall, Grace laughed without checking doorways. The gardener hummed a tune that made the hibiscus forgive old cuts. At dusk, father and son watched fountain lights scatter and didn't speak. In the quiet there was relief. In relief, room for tomorrow. Chain of custody had done its job. The house would do the rest. The morning after the cables packed and the lights went back to their boxes, the house practiced forgiveness by habit, not speeches, chores. Grace moved with a basket and hummed to hear how fear had left the walls. The cook salted, tasted, salted again. Care, not terror, out in the hedge. The gardener tilted a leaf to the sun, apologized for earlier butchery, and trimmed true. James kept his jacket on a chair and walked rooms without an entourage. He knocked at the service door like a guest and stepped into the quarters like a man who knows what power is for. Grace nearly dropped her sheets. The cook straightened at parade rest. "I owe you by name," he said, hands open. "That's not performance. It's a debt." He didn't read a speech. He laid policy on the table, a hotline on laminated card to an independent ear in Victoria Island. CCTV policy signage ugly and clear. Consent forms that explained, not ambushed. He put the packet down like bread. "Training," he said, "for us, for anyone who manages anyone. Outside firm, here and at the office." The cook regarded the card as if it might bolt, then held it like something that would stay. Grace's eyes sharpened on the phrase without retaliation. She nodded once, an oath, in the quiet language of survival. "I'm sorry," he added. He let it land. He didn't ask for absolution or set timelines. Cheap repentance loves deadlines. Calls found him anyway. The board chair wanted a voice that sounded like a ledger. 2 VPs asked compliments, disguised as questions. A columnist invited him to star in a think piece about airs and softness. He deleted. He didn't have time to be a metaphor. He wore a humbler suit and took the elevator to the office without posting it. In the brushed steel, he saw the poor man in blue ghost behind him and didn't look away. He didn't sit at the head of the table. He stood at the screen with a slide that had no art. "Dignity is policy. We're doing 3 things," he said. 1. Whistleblower line. Independent. Non-retaliation with teeth we use. 2. Codify CCTV and privacy transparent. Limited. 3. Supervisor training on power and micro-abuse. Kitchens and corridors. Before headlines. A vice president smiled with a scalpel. "Isn't this dramatic? We've weathered worse without—" "We're not weathering," James said. "We're renovating." An older manager raised a hand. "Noise." "Yes," he said. "Cheaper than the money we don't know we're bleeding." "Also yes." Calendars filled. Legal revised templates. HR, startled into competence, sent an emoji-free memo. Resistance did its math. Let the young boss have his phase. James did his own math. He didn't need converts. He needed compliance long enough for habit to take the wheel. He ate alone on the balcony at lunch, Lagos heat pressing on his shirt. Far below, a vendor sang about water in a minor key. He dialed no one. Let the city tell him what it tells everyone. Move or be moved. Back home, the gardener waited with clippers like contrition. "Oga, I fit show you how hibiscus no go vex again. Please," James said, and meant it. A cut above the node. Anticipate the shoot's desire. 10 minutes. Then 20. Then 30. Care is slow. The chief wore normal like a jacket, a size too small. He greeted with names he'd missed. In the afternoon, he parked by a small mosque and went in because he'd sat in the car too long, pretending he didn't need to. He didn't pray for victory. He prayed not to enjoy it. He prayed for hearing the thin wire between firmness and cruelty. He prayed to find sandals in the dark. When the crown begins to whisper, Sunday brought elders and low talk. A cane, taptile. A friend who treats palm wine like sacrament said, "Give a man the small thing and see what he builds before you hand him a city." Nobody clapped. The only currency allowed after shame is work. Under the garden tree, Breeze worked leaves. With a small intelligence, the fountain talked in a lower register. "You said something," the chief said, "about slavery and truth." "I didn't say it to be quoted," James said, already smiling at himself. "But yes, you said it like a man who burned his fingers and learned what the stove is for." The chief said, "Keep your hand near heat, not on it, near. That's the plan." James said, "I also learned leadership is maintenance, not heroics. Changing bulbs so shadows behave. Policy, so nobody asks if they deserve courtesy. Maintenance is how temples stay temples." The chief said, "War is for cowards. Avoid war." They listened until the light slanted. "The hibiscus forgave you," the chief added when it was already obvious. "Only because the gardener taught me apology in leaf," James said. News did what it does. Columns found serious space between ads. A blog posted a half-hearted mea culpa between a serum launch and a beach. Family chats cooled. A cousin sent prayer hands. An aunt sent a voice note about lions and grass that meant love. Training began. Supervisors sat in straight chairs and learned that power lives in hands that forget they're holding it. A slide defined micro-abuse in 10 lines. A role play made 3 men blush. 2 younger managers asked questions they should have asked 5 years ago. James took notes quietly from the back, and everyone pretended he wasn't the boss. At home, Grace taped the hotline inside her locker and spoke to herself. "I will use it if I must." The cook tried a new stew and served it without apology. The driver turned the radio up 2 clicks when a favorite song came and laughed at himself when no reprimand arrived. At the threshold that night, the iron cooled his palm. The gate hummed an easier note. The city rehearsed its brutal law. Generous curriculum, hawker's call, bus sigh, okadas petulant, snarl. He watched the street without wanting anything from it. Progress. The chief joined him and stood the way men stand when they've found the right page in a manual no one printed. They talked about a board meeting, a pipeline hiccup, the gardener's theory that plants forgive intention. They didn't talk about ghosts. The house had fewer regrets. James asked, "I regret how quickly I enjoy being right." The chief said, "How easy it is to convert pain into performance. That sandals don't flatter my age, not the path." "Me too," James said, "about most of that." The sky arranged its violet cathedral. Bats stitched dark commas into evening. A radio played highlife that made air older than concrete. "Tomorrow," the chief said. "Tomorrow," James said. They left the threshold without opening the drawer. They climbed the stairs like men with work in the morning. The fountain kept time. The gate held its hum. The house learned its new habit. Treat what passes through better than what you keep. The week wore quiet like a fitted shirt, until rumor stretched it. A DM, then a screenshot. A blog with a lipstick logo. By noon, the thing had a hashtag and a posture. The suit would come. Accusations would present fresh faces. The cast list would change. Not the play. A courier brought an envelope with cream paper and professionalism. The guard buzzed the study. The letterhead wore pride too loudly. Okoye v. Amecha Holdings, defamation. Distress. Counsel filed it in the right drawer. No flinching. The signature knew what the room had seen. James read the first paragraph and set the paper down like a plate he wouldn't finish. "We'll answer on paper," he told counsel, "and nowhere else." Courts like decorum, counsel said, especially when the footage already lives online. Outside, Lagos wore noise like jewelry. The foundation board met on Victoria Island under a limping AC and a water view that made everyone forgive it. The program officer walked through clinic slides, midwife turnover, a dead sterilizer, a roof that couldn't remember its job in heavy weather. She arrived late, fieldworks clock insisting on itself. Amaka slid into a chair with a canvas tote stuffed with ugly spreadsheets, rain-colored shirt, hair pinned up for work. She didn't come to perform for donors. She came to make math behave. She asked the questions that take flourish out and leave spine. How many beds? Diesel at what price now that the supplier has sobered? Who holds the pharmacy key? Why? When the board finally switched from self-introduction to problem-solving, James watched the way her fingers moved. Numbers like tools, not toys. At break, he poured 2 plastic cups. Manners sometimes are strategy. Sometimes they're manners. "You're James," she said. Not impressed. Not unimpressed. "I am," he said. "I liked your questions." "They're the clinic's questions," she said, scanning the room to ensure the program officer wasn't being cornered by capital. "We get to say them out loud because AC," he laughed, lowering the room's temperature. "We're piloting a hotline at the house," he said, then cloning it at the company. "Anonymous. No retaliation. It's lady. Late is still now," she said. "You need someone off payroll to hold the reports, and someone mean to enforce the rules you like to praise." "Working on both," he said. "Mean within mercy. Mercy without teeth is PR," she said. "We don't do PR in clinics." "Trying not to do it anywhere," he said. She nodded at the tone. "Not the promise." "Good." Back at the estate, the chief tapped the guardhouse doorway with his knuckles, a new reflex. The stool knew him without the wig. He sat a minute, listening to iron like you listen to a guitar you just tuned. "You day all right, Seer?" the guard asked, awkward with honorifics. "I am," he said, checking if my sandals still fit. The guard grinned at a metaphor he didn't need. The chief patted the iron like an old dog and walked on. Online, the suit dressed itself and took a lap, a screenshot of a stamped filing, a caption punctuated like a pitchfork. The clip returned dressed as reminder. The algorithm, pious only for engagement, ate and wandered off to a new carcass on Banana Island, where irrigation water's privilege. A front desk clerk took a call and put it on hold. Reservations made weeks ago by a voice that spoke as if days belonged to her no longer live. Hotels survive by forgetting well. Tina learned how light forgetting can be when you've lost the leverage to remind. She booked a room where reinvention rents by the hour. In a salon that smelled like acetone and optimism, she sat under a ring light and let a stranger paint her into Act Two. She told herself, the city forgets quickly. Men were worse and had thrived. Narrative can be hacked if you find the right angle. She wasn't wrong on that last point. She'd misjudged where the camera now lives. That night she walked Kessington in oversized shades at ridiculous hour. The gate rose ahead, black and exact, its motor a metronome for patience. She stopped across the street under jacaranda shadow. 2 new guards held watch. The iron didn't care how much her shoes had cost. She took off the glasses like it could heal anything. Let the light catch her face honest for a second, then put them back and left. Days found shape. The hotline rang once with a test call. A gentle voice said, "Yes, we hear you. Yes, you can stay nameless and still be believed." The cook wrote a cunning menu. The gardener swore whistling the same tune at dawn. Made the hibiscus keep better time. At the foundation office, the program officer sent a photo of a nurse holding a laminated checklist with pride enough to light a village. Amaka forwarded without emoji. She texted it to James. He replied with a thumbs up, typed and erased 3 things too eager, then texted, "We should visit next month. Bring someone mean." She wrote back, "Done." On a Tuesday that felt like a Thursday, a serious editor asked to profile him on culture, at home and abroad. "We'll do it at the clinic," he said. The editor hesitated, then agreed to sweat. He called his father. "Clinic interview," he said. "The AC barely works. Let truth sweat," the chief said. The court assigned a date. The internet tried to turn it into a festival until it saw the calendar was crowded. Counsel explained choreography. Very little would happen. Courts are slow rooms. He'd learned to trust slow rooms. At Sunday dinner trimmed of theatrics, elders refused second helpings and tried to pay for palm wine with proverbs. "A river forgets the stone that taught it curve." One said, nobody argued. After, father and son walked the perimeter in easy patrol. Power that doesn't need to make a point moves this way. The gate hummed. A neighbor's generator laughed. "Miss the uniform?" James asked. "Sometimes." The chief said, "Sandals tell you the temperature of ground. Shoes forget. We'll sweep together tomorrow." James said, "It meant more than it sounded." "Bring the gardener," the chief said. "He forgave you." They stood under the mango tree until mosquitoes remembered their contract. Inside, the house kept tempo steady, practical. Lo, the crown slept where it slept. The sandals waited where sandals wait. In a mainland hotel, her lawyer texted, "Hearing set, prepare statements. Avoid social media." She broke both and tapped send. She stared at the ring light's phantom on the ceiling until it moved on. At the foundation office, Amaka wedged a stone under a wobbly desk leg and rewired a budget. James entered with a reporter and a photographer who had a good eye and the humility to use it. They shook hands in the quiet way. Serious work greets other serious work. "Ready?" the editor asked. "No," James said. "Yes." They stepped into the heat. In the clinic's concrete hall, the fan made stubborn breeze, and the place smelled like bleach and effort. A midwife spoke her checklist charm. The photographer made nobody saintly, and everyone strong. On the way out, a child touched his watch and ran. Amaka filed the scene and wrote herself a note she didn't need to write. Habit lies the least. At the gate, the guard saluted like greeting. Not theater. The iron swung and sang a new key. The house met him without speech. The notepad behind glass slept like a relic you don't worship and don't throw away. He didn't touch it. He knocked at the service entrance and asked the cook how the stew was and whether another supplier treated fuel like arithmetic. They talked onions. The gardener whistled his tune, the hibiscus stubborn, vain. Forgiving kept forgiving. Months, not days, enough time for flowers to forget old shears and for a house to learn a slower breath. Heat changed keys. The lagoon traded one smell for another. The gate's motor settled into a hum less vigilant, more ritual. Inside, forgiveness wore habit. Grace folded linen without listening for footsteps. The cook salted twice and apologized only if the stew asked. The gardener whistled one tune at dawn and swore the plants kept better time. James measured by absence. No plates hit Thiele for sport. Voices didn't sharpen in corridors to carve the soft from people. The list moved from paper to bone. Hotline audited. Consent app rolled. Training repeated until boredom made what sermons never will. Work traveled. He and Amaka drafted a grant at a wobbly table in a clinic where the fan ran on stubbornness. They built budget floor up, number by honest number, knowing diesel lies and what to do when it does. When the generator failed mid-sentence, they kept talking in heat. and a nurse passed boiled water with a maitre d's dignity. You doubled training, Amaka said, pencil tapping a shy column. Habit lies the least, he said, catching himself liking how policy stole his earlier poetry. If they leave, take it with them. Write it twice, she said. Taught and kept. He said okay and meant it. A reporter wanted a profile. He refused the boardroom and brought the man to sweat in a plastic chair, while a photographer was rude to shadows. Why here? The reporter asked. Because policy meets consequence here, James said. Office walls lie. The midwife, with the calming voice, recited sterilization protocol, tapping lamination like a talisman. She praised no donors. She cared that things be clean. The camera saw humans in the car. Amaka watched hawkers triangulate buses, and a boy guide his mother over a puddle like a bodyguard. When you're not watched, she said to the glass, does the boring thing still happen? That's the plan, he said. Make the boring thing beautiful. At the estate, the fountain had learned to be kind. The iron held its note like a choir singer. In the study, behind glass, the notepad slept. He didn't touch it. He watered a plant and cracked a window a quarter-inch. Evidence wasn't only for court, it was for memory. It kept your mouth humble when talking big about reform. The old footage did its blunt work. The Pelican case kept its seal. Better proof lived in small acts nobody filmed. He found one waiting uniform still in plastic cut from cloth. The wearers chose. Grace held one to herself, joked that blue hides sin, then went quiet, seeing her reflection hold something clean. Fits? He asked. It will, she said. If the seam rips, the hotline won't fix it. No, he said. You bring it here. We fix the seam. The phone should be for bigger sins, she said. The chief returned from a loop of suits, Port Harcourt. Accra, home practicing wearing his old name without its old weight. Hotel mirrors offered him a wig's ghost. He laughed at rehearsing humility. He thanked God for sandals more than crowns and tried not to want points for it. He sat a minute at the guardhouse, like a tourist at a shrine. The softer bulb pleased the geckos. He ran a thumb along the ledge and felt day one's groove. The guard offered groundnuts. Unsure, he took 3 and blessed what was never his to bless. Amaka arrived to plan. The house was more honest than beautiful. She didn't flinch at glossy. She looked for what glossy was doing. A framed photo hung by the pantry staff in Sunday best, smiles that didn't audition. She tilted her head. They made it. James said, suddenly shy about a frame. Hang it lower, she said, so the person who dusts it can see their eyes. He climbed a chair and dropped it 2 inches, while she held the back and made a noise that scolded his impatience. They stood too close afterward and didn't mind. The fountain made its low grammar. They worked at the table with the door open so the house could overhear their sincerity. Budgets flowed reasonable. Dates found boxes. The cook brought plantain and stew with pride. That meant we have come through something. She ate like appetite had been invited for once. He forgot himself around cutlery and nicked his thumb. She caught his hand, inspected red. Small, she said. Water. Plaster. Don't be dramatic. I wasn't, he said, discovering he had been. Her phone pinged. Counsel. Hearing adjourned. Opposing counsel requested continuance. The world turned a page without flourish. Good, she asked. Neutral, he said. Courts are slow rooms. Keep moving in fast ones, she said, ticking generator maintenance off, like outlawing famine. On the balcony, the city wrote its manual Okadas stitching commas. A woman selling oranges, with a voice that cut through tin, a plane underlining a sky. The chief joined them and looked out like a man measuring ground. You did the interview at the clinic, he said. Yes. Good. Let truth sweat. He watched the hibiscus. Plants forgive you, he said, more than boards do. The gardener taught me apology in leaf. James said. The chief looked pleased with translation and left them to papers and quiet. Night came on time with fewer tricks. The gate kept its note. The street rehearsed tomorrow. Grace passed the open door, paused a second longer than necessary, then went on with a private smile. I recognize this house again. When the work could be called finished, Amaka capped her pen and stretched like Grace takes effort. Where's the crown? She asked, glancing at the drawer like crowns glow through wood. In a drawer that closes, he said, better to know it's there and not touch it. And the sandals, she said, by the back door, he said, easier to find in the dark. She laughed an economical laugh. Keep them close. Men who forget shoes forget where they're going. He walked her to the gate. The security light had learned gentler brightness. The motor hummed. The iron waited. She looked at him like a craftsperson considers a tool worth borrowing. Clinic. Next week, she said. Bring someone mean. Done, he said. She stepped into the night and let the street claim her. He watched her pass from person to silhouette to idea to nothing eyes can hold. He didn't go back to budgets. He checked the screws on the lowered photo, learning Waite's quiet tricks. Passing the notepad behind glass, he paused and put his palm there briefly, like checking yesterday's temperature. Evidence slept where it should. Better proof breathed in rooms the timbre of laughter, the absence of flinching. The Gatekeeper song. He killed the last light and let the house find darkness. Outside, a bat stitched Violet shut. The fountain kept time like a clock that forgave alarm. Sandals waited by the door where the ground was cool. Somewhere a clinic wrote a new line on a chart nobody would hashtag. The morning chose gray. Not rain, just that courtroom light Lagos keeps for days when everybody wants to be right. Traffic did its low prayer. A KK's radio argued football like it could change precedent. At the estate, the gate drew a steady line through air, a metronome counting a different bar. The envelope came last night with a revised time and a scolding about decorum. James slept 4 honest hours. When he woke, the fountain sounded like water and not memory. The tie didn't try too hard. The mirror gave him an age he could claim without lying. Court, the chief said in the hall. No blessing, no battle cry. A destination. The room believed in itself. Varnished benches, a fan grunting toward duty, portraits of men in wigs who'd never seen a bus from inside. Lawyers arranged paper like liturgy. Phones vibrated and obeyed signs. The conscientious obey. Opposing counsel wore new asphalt. His client wore sunglasses, meant as armor and read as fear. Tina's jaw looked wired. Air immaculate. Hands not. Eyes in the gallery dipped to phones and back. Content waited with its mouth open. Before the judge, the assistant slid into the row and leaned forward. Sir, he breathed. One thing. An early clip the day before signage. Not in bundle. Incriminating. Inadmissible. James looked at his father. The chief didn't blink. This is when you decide the story you'll tell your mirror. Disclose. The chief said. We could, the assistant began. We don't. James finished. We won't. The judge entered. The room stood. Ceremony found its groove. The suit read itself in with the dignity of paper. Opposing counsel performed injury with a good baritone. The defendants conducted a campaign to destroy Ms. Okoye's reputation with doctored footage. Malicious insinuation. Calculated leaks. We seek redress. He sat with a flourish, rehearsed in cheaper rooms. Defense stood without theater. We will show substantial truth, lawful recording, and that dissemination followed a private briefing confined to fact. We will also disclose a preliminary clip taken a day before signage, not tendered, offered to complete chronology. We accept admonishment. The judge tilted his head, surprised without being impressed. Appropriate. Evidence arrived as documentation. Timestamps, hashes, chain of custody in monospace. The admissible clips spoke without music kiss, borrowed against oath. The fool sentence, the whisper using prison as leash, the spoon misused as gavel. The gallery shifted, not because they loved truth, because it weighed a lot. Objections rose and were overruled. Opposing counsel pivoted toward context, like reaching for an umbrella in wind that has opinions. When his client spoke, she offered anger fitted to sympathy. I was under pressure, she said. He was away. The house was hostile. The gate man harassed. Dates and times, the judge asked. A saw through soft wood. She hesitated. The room smelled like lies, sweating. Cross didn't hunt. It presented paper, rosters, logs, a photo of signage dated to end an argument, a Banana Island registry, circling back to catch her where she said she'd never been. Asked about the man in the Lexus, she said no, too fast. Asked where she posted from, she said home too confidently. GPS testified the way God refuses to without mercy. In a public post, counsel said, "You wrote, 'The home I built.' Did you contribute to the mortgage or hold title?" "My labor," she began. No, not Carlos on the stand, the clerk with the smile that didn't reach eyes. He'd kept quiet until compelled. He read from a logbook that smelled of disinfectant and perfume, dates aligned with clips, rates matched sweet. A signature tried to be legible and failed. Opposing counsel attempted to make him forget. He produced the carbon copy. Evidence isn't moral, it insists. At recess, James let noise have the corridor. The vlogger appeared, microphone like bait. "Do you feel bad watching a woman dragged?" He counted a beat. "I feel bad staff were dragged in private," he said. "I feel responsible for rooms where it happened." "That's not a clip," she muttered. "It's a policy," he said and went back in. The inadmissible disclosure earned a frown, a warning, a fine that wouldn't change dinner. The chief nodded and took it like penance for a technical sin. Sacrifice isn't always blood. Sometimes it's reputation, letting itself be scolded on principle. By afternoon, the room smelled like burnt dust and stale certainty. The judge read without sermon. Defamation fails. Substantial truth is a defense recognized by this court and any sensible mind. Emotional distress is not a cloak for conduct evidenced. Defendants are admonished regarding preliminary surveillance before signage. Costs adjusted accordingly. He looked up at the wall like the internet breathed behind it. This is a court, not a content mill. Take your victories and your shame outside. Gavel. The clerk jumped, recovered. Opposing counsel hissed a whisper. Tina stood too quickly. Sunglasses returned to her face, the way armor returns to a poster. In the flattening light, she looked very young and very tired. Self-destruction rarely explodes. It accumulates in small refusals, dressed as pride. On the steps, microphones bloomed. The vlogger lunged. James raised a hand. "No statements," he said. "We'll post the judgment." Blur staff faces. "That's not how this works." She blinked. "It could be," he said, walking. On the drive home, the chief watched the city climb itself toward evening. "We disclosed," he said. "If we buried it," James said, "we'd win the case and lose the house." No detour to celebration. A detour to a clinic where a fan insisted on turning. Amaka met them with a ledger and a grin. She glanced at their shoes, dusty from government floors. "Court?" she asked. "Slow room," he said. "We trusted it." "Good," she said. "Help me move the refrigerator. The new sterilizer weighs like sin." They moved it. The chief pushed. like a man remembering other work, laughed when it surrendered to the corner. When the light winked green, the nurse clapped once, as if a bird had startled into flight. At home, the gate swung like a truth, kept on purpose. Grace crossed with new uniforms. The cook whistled at a pot like he expected harmony. The gardener saluted with clippers. A soldier at peace with maintenance. The assistant appeared with a pelican case. "Where do you want the last of it?" "In the dark," the chief said, "where evidence belongs when it's finished teaching." They shelved it by the notepad and closed the glass. Gravity, not fanfare. Night took its place. The house didn't change posture. James checked the screws on a framed photo, like a new superstition. The study window breathed a quarter-inch. He knocked at the service entrance. The driver blinked. "I'm thinking of a bus," James said. "For the clinic route, cheaper than funerals." "Good bus, or politician's bus?" The driver said. "Good." James said, "With a mechanic we pay well." "I know a man." The driver said, "Mean in the right ways. Bring him tomorrow." James said, "Across town on a pedestrian bridge above water that smells like every promise broken." A woman in sunglasses at night leaned and watched a fairy smear light she could almost claim. Her lawyer texted, "We can appeal." She typed, "Do it," and didn't send. She typed, "I'm sorry," and didn't save. A pack of boys ran by with a speaker and plastic. One looked at her face and looked away. Not unkind. Kessington's gate kept its hum. The fountain wrote the same sentence. Fewer exclamation points. Father and son walked one perimeter like a prayer you learn by repeating. "Finished?" the chief asked. "No," James said. He thought of rooms without cameras, hands that hurt unwitnessed, the short person in your shadow, the sandals by the door, easy to find in the dark. Responsible. "Good," the chief said. "Responsibility is a gate that never sleeps." They stood in the doorway and listened to the city write tomorrow. A gecko chased a ghost under the light. A generator coughed and remembered its job. Laughter floated from beyond the hedge, in a language neither spoke and both understood. The crown stayed where it stayed. The sandals waited where sandals wait. Down the road, another compound hummed under a fickle bulb. A poor man in a blue uniform tested a hinge with a sure hand, listening for how metal wants to move. Inside, someone rehearsed kindness. Someone practiced cruelty. The iron didn't care about arrivals. It remembered how to open. The verdict didn't live in the courtroom. It lived in the way a house held breath. When footsteps approached, the angle of a hedge cut with respect, a refrigerator, humming mercy into steel, and in the night air, thin as wire, a sentence to keep saying after cameras get bored. Make the boring thing beautiful.